I remember that day like it was yesterday. It was a calm Tuesday morning. Sunlight filtered through the curtains and my coffee was still warm in my hand. Then my phone lit up. A message from Jake, the man I had called my husband for the past 8 years. I'm leaving. I'm starting over with someone who truly loves me, Sophie. I've taken my share from our account. Don't try to contact me. There are moments in life when the world just stops. This was one of them. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my phone across the room like they do in the movies. Instead, I calmly set my coffee down, took a deep breath, and opened the drawer of my desk. Inside was a second phone, one I had bought 6 months ago. 6 months ago when Jake started coming home late with vague excuses. 6 months ago when Sophie, my best friend since college, began avoiding eye contact whenever Jake came up in conversation. 6 months ago when their stories started syncing just a little too well. I saw through it all during a dinner. Sophie said she had a business trip in Chicago that weekend. Jake said he was going on a fishing trip with co-workers. Conveniently, they both lost cell signal for the exact same 2 days. That wasn't coincidence. That was a sign. Did it hurt? Of course. Did I feel like falling apart every single day? But I chose a different path. I watched, I gathered, I documented, I prepared. You see, Jake always thought he was smarter than me. He was the kind of man who believed a smile and a bouquet could erase any mistake. And Sophie. She thought a 20-year friendship was too strong for me to ever suspect her. They were wrong. I'd known for a while, and I was ready for this day. I powered on the second phone. The screen lit up with a banking app, an account Jake never knew existed. Over the past 6 months, I had quietly transferred 65% of our savings, little by little. Too small for him to notice. Big enough that I wouldn't walk away with nothing. I'm not the kind of woman who seeks revenge. I'm the kind who prepares. I finished my now cold coffee, looked out the window at the house we bought together, now mine alone. I remembered the first time we stepped into this place. Jake hugged me from behind and whispered, "This is the beginning of our forever." Ironic, isn't it? Love can end. Friendships can betray. Life can fall apart with one message, but that doesn't mean you can't rise. I called Lisa, my lawyer, someone Jake never knew I was connected to. She picked up on the first ring. "It's time," I said. When I hung up, I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't a victim. She wasn't a heartbroken wife or a betrayed friend. She was a warrior. They thought I knew nothing. They thought I'd fall apart. They thought I'd suffer in silence. Unfortunately for them, I was always 2 steps ahead, and the game was just getting started. If my story intrigued you, leave a comment below. What would you do if you were in my shoes? And don't forget to subscribe, because next time I'll reveal the sweet little trap I set for the cheaters who thought they got away. The first week after Jake left was the strangest time of my life. No sound of keys jingling at the front door. No clothes scattered across the bathroom floor. No arguments about whose turn it was to take out the trash. That silence, it should have broken me, but instead it gave me clarity. I remember the first moment I began to suspect. It was the day Jake changed the passcode on his phone. After 8 years together, we had always known each other's passwords. Not because we didn't trust each other, but because there had never been anything to hide. One evening, my phone died, and I reached for his to call my mom. The passcode no longer worked. "Security reasons," he said. There was a data breach at the office. I nodded and smiled. But that night, I installed a mini camera in his car. A tiny thing tucked under the passenger seat. I'm not proud of it, but my gut was screaming. 3 days later, I watched the footage. Jake parked at a small hotel on the edge of town. Sophie walked in from the other side. They embraced, they kissed. It wasn't the kind of hug you give a friend or a coworker. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't sleep either. I planned. Sophie wasn't just my best friend. She was also my business partner. We had built the Honeycrumb together, a cozy little cafe known for handmade pastries that had become a neighborhood favorite. We started it from scratch. What Sophie didn't know was that I held 100% of the official ownership. When we signed the paperwork, she was too busy flirting with her date to read the fine print. I had listed her as a creative partner, not a co-owner. A small distinction with massive consequences. I know it sounds cold, but something had felt off for a long time. Back in college, Sophie always wanted what I had. She copied my hairstyles, bought the same clothes, dated the guys I liked. I let it all slide, but not when it came to the shop. That I protected. In the second week after Jake left, I met with Marcus, my business attorney, someone neither Jake nor Sophie had ever heard of. "Can we protect what's mine?" I asked. Marcus smiled. "Not just protect it, Emily. We can go on offense." He explained that with the messages I'd saved and the signed business contracts, I had a solid case. Jake had violated multiple clauses in our prenuptial agreement, and Sophie unwittingly had signed a non-compete clause when we formed the Honeycrumb. I walked out of Marcus's office feeling powerful. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was in control. But then came the next blow. I received an email from a loyal customer. A new bakery was getting ready to open just 5 blocks away from the Honeycrumb. Its name, Sweet Affair. I laughed at the irony. And guess who the listed owners were? Jake Wilson and Sophie Palmer. They didn't even try to hide it. They assumed I'd be too broken to fight back. They hadn't just taken my marriage. They hadn't just betrayed my friendship. Now they were coming for my career. My life. I stood by the window looking out at the neighborhood we'd lived in for 8 years. People walked their dogs. Kids played on the sidewalk. The world kept turning even though my heart had been torn in two. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. I opened my laptop and drafted an email to every supplier of the Honeycrumb. Vendors I'd signed exclusive contracts with for the past 5 years. Vendors I supported when COVID nearly put them out of business. Vendors I paid up front so they could scale. "A new shop may reach out to you soon," I wrote. Just a friendly reminder about our exclusivity agreements. I didn't mention any names, I didn't need to. Then I sent Jake a message, the first one since he left. "Congrats on the new bakery. Hope your new recipes are as good as the ones you stole from my computer." Then I turned off my phone and waited. Funny thing about war, it isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, like the way I flip through legal documents, like the way I sip red wine, like the way I prepare for battle. They want to play, I'll play. But by my rules. Have you ever faced betrayal? What would you do if you were me? Leave a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe for the next chapter where I come face to face with the cheaters and uncover a secret that changes everything. There are moments that define who you are. Mine came on a Wednesday morning 3 weeks after Jake left. I stood outside Sweet Affair staring through the glass. They had copied nearly every detail of the Honeycrumb. Same color scheme, same furniture, even the exact same font on the menu. The only difference, the photos on the wall, Jake and Sophie grinning like they'd built this life from scratch. Instead of Jake and me. I pushed the door open. A tiny bell rang exactly the same sound I'd picked out for the Honeycrumb 5 years ago. No appointment, no warning. I wanted to see the look on their faces. Sophie looked up from the register. The smile on her lips disappeared instantly. She'd always been easy to read, one of the reasons I trusted her for 20 years. Her eyes widened, panic flooding her face. She buzzed Jake through the intercom. "You need to come up front, now." I said nothing, just walked to the counter and looked at the menu. Every item was a copy of my recipes. The recipes I'd spent 5 years perfecting. The recipes I'd shared with Sophie in confidence and friendship. Jake emerged from the back wearing a chef's jacket, something he'd never worn when we were together. He used to say cooking was a woman's hobby. The irony was almost too rich. "Emily," he said, trying to sound calm, though I saw the tension in his neck. "We didn't expect you." "Clearly not," I replied, my voice soft enough to crack glass. "I was just curious how much money you spent copying my entire business." "Our business," Sophie cut in, trying to regain her composure. "I helped build the Honeycrumb, remember?" I smiled. "Oh yes. Let's talk about that. Do you happen to have a copy of the partnership contract we signed? I'd love to revisit a few details." Sophie turned pale. She didn't have a copy. I knew that. She trusted me too much to read the fine print, too busy flirting with my husband. Jake stepped closer, lowering his voice. Why are you here, Emily? To stir up trouble? No, Jake. I'm here as a customer. I'd like to try that one. I pointed at a caramel lavender cake in the display case. My signature recipe. The one I created after our trip to France 3 years ago, the trip Sophie didn't attend. Sophie's hands shook as she cut the slice. She knew what this was. She knew I knew. Lavender, huh? I asked sweetly. Interesting choice for a new bakery. Jake looked at Sophie, then back at me. It was Sophie's idea. I pulled out my phone and opened a voice recorder. Fascinating. Because I have the full development notes for that recipe in my journal, dated 2019, with both our signatures on each revision. Sophie turned even paler. Why did you do this, Sophie? I asked quietly. 20 years of friendship, and you throw it away for him. I gestured toward Jake without looking. You don't understand, Sophie stammered. We're in love. I laughed. Not out of anger, not bitterly, but with genuine understanding. Love, is that what you call taking all the money from our shared account and vanishing without a goodbye, sneaking around behind my back for 6 months, or copying the business I spent my life building? I took a bite of the cake. Perfect. Because it was my recipe. You know, I said, I'm not here to make a scene. I just want you both to know. I know, and this won't be as easy as you think. As I turned to leave, Jake grabbed my arm. Emily, wait, we need to talk. I can explain? I looked down at his hand, then into his eyes. I said nothing, just stared. He let go. Outside, I called Marcus. They used everything I told him. Every single recipe. Identical. We can act now. I've been waiting for this call, Marcus replied. I'll send the cease and desist this afternoon. But Emily, are you sure once we start this there's no turning back? I looked back at the bakery sweet affair gleaming in the morning light. I've never been more sure, I said. That afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. Hello, Ms. Emily. It's Anna. I used to work with Sophie at the Honeycrumb. Her voice trembled. I think you should hear something. Anna sent me an audio recording, a conversation between Jake and Sophie recorded just last week. In it, Sophie expressed regret. She was uncomfortable stealing my recipes, worried about the legal consequences. And Jake, you need to decide whose side you're on, Sophie. There's no room for weakness here. As the recording ended, a single tear slid down my cheek, not from sadness, but because the truth had finally settled in. Jake never loved me, and maybe he didn't truly love Sophie either. He only loved himself. I wiped the tear away and forwarded the recording to Marcus. One more piece in our case, one step closer to winning. That night, I slept soundly for the first time in weeks. Not because the pain had vanished, but because I had turned that pain into power. Do you think Sophie will come back to my side? Or will she stay loyal to Jake? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for the next episode where I launch the legal strike and reveal what happened when Sophie showed up at my door on a night drowned in rain. They say the best revenge is living well, but I have to admit sometimes the best revenge is a meticulously prepared 300-page legal brief. 1 month after my visit to Sweet Affair, everything was ready. Marcus hadn't just prepared the lawsuit for copyright infringement and intellectual property theft. He had also uncovered that Jake had been using his corporate email to contact my suppliers, trying to persuade them to break their exclusivity contracts. He's committed at least 3 serious violations, Marcus told me as we sat in his office. Breach of non-compete, copying copyrighted recipes, and intentional interference with a competing business, not to mention misusing company resources for personal gain. He could lose his job over that. And as Sophie, I asked, spinning the wedding ring I still wore, not out of love, but as a reminder of the lesson it cost me. She's legally liable too, Marcus said, but to a lesser extent, and if she cooperates. I nodded, understanding. We had discussed this possibility. Sophie could become an ally, a whistleblower, in exchange for immunity. I didn't want to destroy her life. I just wanted justice. and maybe some closure for my shattered heart. Marcus filed the lawsuit that Tuesday. By Wednesday, word had spread through our small town. By Thursday, a local reporter reached out wanting to share my story. Woman betrayed by husband and best friend strikes back with brains and legal firepower. That was the headline they pitched. I agreed to the interview on one condition: they had to focus on the business, not the drama. I didn't want to be seen as a victim. I wanted to be seen as a businesswoman defending her work. The interview went live Friday morning. By noon, the honeycomb was packed. People came out of curiosity, but they stayed for the pastries. 3 investors reached out about partnerships. 7 shops requested wholesale supply. I didn't know if this was a blessing in disguise, but I knew one thing: I wouldn't waste it. That night, my story went viral on TikTok. Someone had clipped the interview, added dramatic music, and overlaid the caption, "POV. You thought you could cheat a smart woman and get away with it." The video hit 1 million views in under 3 hours. My phone blew up with notifications, but I set it aside, focused on my glass of wine, the book in my hand, and the sound of rain outside the window. Then the doorbell rang. I checked the security camera. Sophie, soaked to the bone, no makeup. She looked like a stray cat abandoned in a storm. I paused, then opened the door. "Can I come in?" she asked. Voice so soft, I barely heard it over the rain. I stepped aside silently. Sophie entered, dripping onto the hardwood floor Jake and I had installed 5 years ago, on a Sunday filled with laughter, kisses, the scent of new wood and glue. I handed her a towel. "I'm so sorry," Sophie said, tears blending with raindrops. "I made a huge mistake." I said nothing, just waited. "Jake and we're over," she continued. "He's not who I thought he was. He lied to me about everything about you, about your marriage, about the money." I let out a quiet laugh. "What did he tell you that you cheated first? That you were controlling? That you never gave him space to grow?" I shook my head. The same old lies. The easy lies Jake always turned to when he needed sympathy. "And you believed him I wanted to?" Sophie said, her voice breaking. "Because if I didn't, I'd have to face the fact that I betrayed my best friend. For absolutely nothing." She held out a USB drive. "These are all the emails, messages, recordings between me and Jake. Everything about Sweet Affair, every file he stole from your computer." I looked at it. Why, I asked. Why now? Because I finally saw him for who he is. When your interview went live, he lost it. Not fear, not regret, rage. He started blaming me, said I was careless, that I left too many trails. She continued, her voice steadier now. "Then I found out he emptied our joint account just like he did to you, transferred it all into a private one I can't access." I wasn't surprised, not even a little. "What do you want, Sophie?" I asked bluntly. "Forgiveness, a legal deal. I want to do the right thing," she said. "I know you're suing us. I know I could lose everything. I deserve that. But if I can help you beat Jake, maybe I can redeem a part of myself." I looked at the woman in front of me, the woman I once called my best friend for 20 years, the one I had shared secrets, dreams, and fears with, the one who broke my heart. And I made a decision. "Sit down," I said. "We need to talk." That night, Sophie and I made a plan, not to be friends again. That time was gone, but to form a pact, an alliance. She would testify against Jake, expose every detail of his fraud. In return, I wouldn't pursue damages against her personally. When Sophie left, the rain still fell. But she stood taller. And for the first time in weeks, I felt lighter too. Not because I had forgiven, but because I had found strength in my pain. And I had turned it into something more powerful than rage justice. Jake thought he could deceive me and walk away clean. He didn't realize I was always watching, always preparing, always 2 steps ahead, and now the next move is mine. Have you ever had to choose between forgiveness and justice? What would you do in my place? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe, because in the final episode, I face Jake in court and begin a brand new chapter of my life. When I walked into the courthouse on the day of the verdict, I didn't wear black like a mourning wife grieving the death of her marriage. I wore cobalt blue, the color of confidence, of open skies, of new possibilities. Marcus walked beside me carrying a briefcase full of evidence we likely wouldn't even need. Sophie had given us more than enough. She sat in the back row, not as a defendant, but as a witness for the plaintiff. Jake entered with his lawyer. A young man in a cheap suit, his face taut with unease. Jake didn't look at me. For the first time since I'd known him, he couldn't meet my eyes. The trial moved faster than I expected. The judge had reviewed all documents beforehand. Evidence of stolen recipes, contract violations, intellectual property theft. It was all undeniable. Mr. Wilson, the judge said, "Are you aware that your actions not only breach business laws, but also represent a serious violation of ethical conduct?" Jake mumbled something about his emotional support being a contribution to the honeycomb. The judge looked at him like a child caught lying about stealing cookies. "The court rules in favor of the plaintiff," she said. "Mr. Wilson is ordered to pay $250,000 in economic and emotional damages. Additionally, he is barred from operating any similar business for 2 years within a 25-mile radius." Then she turned to Sophie. "Ms. Palmer, due to your cooperation in this case, you will not face personal damages. However, you are prohibited from using any recipes or business concepts from the honeycomb for the next 5 years." Relief spread through me like sunlight breaking after a storm. Not because of the money, not because of the ban, because justice had been served. Because someone finally said, "You were right. You're not crazy. You deserve better." As we walked out of the courtroom, Jake tried to stop me one last time. "You can't do this to me," he hissed, his voice filled with anger. "I built my career, my life." I met his eyes with a cold stare. "You did this to yourself, Jake. You had everything. A marriage, a woman who loved you, a home, a future, and you threw it all away for greed and lies." I walked away, leaving him standing there with his anger and his regret. 3 months after the verdict, I received an email from Jake's former company. He had been fired after they discovered he used company resources to plan Sweet Affair. He couldn't find another job in the industry. He had to sell his condo to pay the settlement. I didn't feel joy or pity, only release, as if a chapter had finally closed, a chapter that no longer defined me. The honeycomb flourished after the lawsuit. People didn't just come for the pastries anymore, they came for the story. They wanted to meet the woman who stood up for herself, for her business, for her life. I opened a second location, then a third, hired more staff, launched a product line for online orders, and as my business grew, so did I. I began teaching online courses for women entrepreneurs, not just about baking or decorating a beautiful storefront, but about ownership, about reading the fine print, about preparing for the worst, even while hoping for the best. 6 months after the trial, I received an unexpected invitation to speak at a TEDx event, the theme, Overcoming Adversity. Standing on that stage, I looked out over the crowd and told my story, not as a victim, but as a survivor, as a fighter, as a founder. When my husband texted me that he was leaving me for my best friend, I said he thought that was the end of our story. He thought I'd fall apart, shatter, become a smaller, weaker version of myself. I paused, looked straight into the camera. But sometimes what looks like your ending is actually the beginning of your strongest self. I spoke about the months I spent quietly gathering evidence, about how I protected what was mine, about how I turned heartbreak into strategy, and how I learned that sometimes losing the people you thought you couldn't live without is the best thing that could ever happen to you. Not everyone deserves a place in your story, I said, and that's okay, because it makes room for the ones who do. The ones who'll never make you question your worth. As I finished my talk, I shared one final thought, the thought that carried me through my darkest nights and loneliest days. "Don't let betrayal break you," I said. "Let it wake up the power inside you, the part of you that's been waiting to rise." The audience rose to their feet in applause, not because my story was rare, but because it was relatable. We've all been betrayed in one way or another, and we all carry the strength to rise again. That night, I returned to my house, a home that was now completely mine, decorated how I liked, with the art I chose. I kicked off my heels and curled into the couch. I was no longer Emily the wife, no longer Emily the betrayed friend. I was Emily the entrepreneur, Emily the speaker, Emily the survivor, and most of all, Emily the free. Free from betrayal, free from toxic love, free to build a life not defined by what I lost, but by what I found, the strength I never knew I had. Jake left me for my best friend. He never knew I had already known, and he certainly never knew that his choice would end up being the greatest gift he could ever give me, the gift of freedom. Have you ever faced betrayal and risen above it? What's your story of rebirth? Share it in the comments below. And if my journey inspired you, subscribe and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, sometimes the people who walk out of your life are exactly the ones who should. And sometimes the most painful endings are the beginnings of your most powerful chapter.